advisor can help you avoid making one or two or three major mistakes in the life of that relationship that they will have paid for themselves multiple times over.
All right, we are back with episode 4 of our Quick Takes. I'm your co-host, Paisley Nardini, joined by Josh Flade. And a super exciting topic to discuss today. We are going to start with the question of, should I hire a financial advisor? So Josh, given you are a quasi-financial advisor, I'm going to ask you, should I hire a financial advisor?
And I would say no. And we can just end this.
Thank you for tuning in. See you guys next week.
Thank you. This has been an awesome episode. No, I'm joking. And my business partner, Morgan Lemaitre, is a financial advisor and is, in fact, like one of the most amazing financial advisors I've ever interacted with.
Shout out to Morgan.
And yeah, my answer to that would be, it just depends. It depends on your situation. It depends on your net worth, the complexity of your life. And so I think that, and this is one way that Morgan really likes to talk about individuals as far as clients go, or business partners, would be ideal clients. And in the sense that an ideal client is somebody who we could really move the needle with as far as really helping them and their situation. So if you have somebody that has a very complex tax situation, or a very complex estate situation, or very complex investments, like all of these things would require, I would say, a financial advisor, and a good financial advisor could really help move the needle. And I think most people think of financial advisors as just investors, but really good financial advisors wear a ton of hats and provide a holistic plan and holistic support for individuals. And one hat that I think most people don't talk about with financial advisors is the therapist hat. The person that these people can talk to, that because a lot of people, especially if you are an ultra high net worth individual, you frequently can't talk with other people about maybe your financial situation. And if the markets are crashing and you just need somebody to talk to, that's really what a financial advisor is there for, is like help you. Or if you're having problems with your children and trying to help your children understand intragenerational wealth and how that works, and helping them become good stewards of what will likely come into their possession. Like really good financial advisors are doing all of those things. They're educators, they're therapists, they're investors, they're even though they're not truly lawyers, right? But they can provide some strategic thinking around taxes and all these other things.
Yeah, I think actually one comment that you made that I want to pick up on is like, what do advisors do? And I think you're absolutely correct that most people, laymen, assume that the role of a financial advisor is to take your money, invest it, and make you a ton of money, and so you can retire early and happy. When in actuality, the value that advisors provide has so little to do with the actual investments. And I hate to say this because you and I are both in investing roles, and this almost undermines like why we went to school and all of our years of education, but it becomes a bit of a like getting them on track, and then you can kind of like set and forget the investment piece of it. As long as you have a good foundation and you're rebalancing and putting money to work, all of the other things is probably what you and Morgan and all the other advisors out there are spending 90% of their week on. It's not the investments. It's the behavioral component. It's the family component. It's the cash flows. It's the estate planning. And so I think that's really important too, to go back to the answer of like, should I hire a financial advisor? I think if you're going into the mentality of like, I'm going to hire an advisor so I can make a bunch of money, or so I can like help with my finances, that's just one component of it. And Josh, you and I have even talked about this. Like, there's a lot of options out there, especially if you're in your early stages of your career and you don't have a lot of wealth accumulated yet. Sometimes in those kind of like lower tiers, it makes a lot more sense to just have like what they're calling like the robo advisor, or the technology platforms, where you can open an account, and as long as you're diligent enough to put money away every month, every quarter, every week, that might be enough for you. And then I think the other thing I wanted to comment on too is this idea around the value that the advisor does provide. And like I said, I have financial advisors in my family as well. And one of them had attended a funeral of a client just last week, and he came home and he said, it's just amazing to see how much a part of that family that we were. You become an extension of the family through just the daily, weekly, yearly interactions that you have. But then you realize how much that you did for this family or this couple to get them on track, and you became a part of their life, and you understood like what their kids are doing and where they're going to school and their home improvements. And I think that really just speaks volumes as to the value that the advisor provides to provide that structure and foundation. So yeah, I think from my perspective, like, does it make sense to hire an advisor? To your point, it's not a yes or no. Where are you in the life cycle, and what are your goals, and what do you need support on?
And I would add that if an advisor can help you avoid making one or two or three major mistakes in the life of that relationship, that they will have paid for themselves multiple times over. I saw this firsthand with Morgan, my business partner, in April of this year, when the markets were selling off during the tariff tantrum, and we had people who wanted to sell and liquidate their accounts at the absolute worst time. And Morgan was wearing the therapist hat at that time and really helped talk these people off a ledge. And I mean, what a completely different outcome for them. If they would have sold the cash in April 7, April 8, versus sticking to a plan and keeping and being disciplined around that plan. I mean, just you do that once for somebody in their life, and you have paid, your fees have been paid for multiple times over, which I think is another part of this whole conversation, because I think sometimes people think that financial advisors, you have to pay fees for these things. And I don't think that fees are really an issue if there's value associated with those fees. I think where you have problems is when there's no value associated necessarily with those fees, and I think that's where it can be problematic. So let me ask you this question, Paisley, which is, if you were looking for a financial advisor, and you work with a bunch of financial advisors, I work with a bunch of financial advisors as an outsourced chief investment officer. If you were looking for a financial advisor, what are some things that you would ask? What are some questions, or what are things that you would explore as you tried to decide which financial advisor to choose?
Yeah, I think something that's been important to me, and this again is a reflection of who I have in my inner circle, family members being in the advisory space. I think something that's really important to me, and doesn't have to be important to others, but is having an advisor who is independent. And what does that mean? There's different levels and flavors of being independent as an advisor. But ultimately, what it means to me at the top level is that you are not beholden to some kind of home office as to what financial instruments or products you can put in the portfolio. You don't have these, necessary quotas where they're earning commissions based on selling you products to put in your portfolio. Ultimately, I think that removes that fiduciary lens, meaning like, are your clients being served in their best interest, or is this a bit of like you making money on their behalf and ultimately your company making money? And so the more that you can have that independence and that decision making, so that the advisor is sitting across the table from you, and at the end of the day, like, the fee that they're going to earn is not based on if they sell you one fund over the other fund, right? It's going to be this holistic package, revenue-based or AUM-based fee. And I think that's something that's really important to me, like having grown up in this industry, and the importance of being unbiased and having a fiduciary cap on when you're making decisions for your clients. So the independent portion, I think, is one factor that I would absolutely look for. And then the next thing I would also consider, again, going back to what are your individual objectives in hiring an advisor, is it that behavioral component, is to help you keep you on track, knowing you maybe don't have the personality that's going to, rebalance your portfolio every quarter, or keep putting money, stashing money away, or asking those tough questions about estate documents and trust documents. Are you going to have access to someone that you can truly trust? And I think this goes back to, again, sometimes there's an allure of hiring an advisor who works at the big wirehouses that has all the, access to these private market investments and these like one-off investment deals. Because some of the advisors just don't have the scale and access in more of the smaller independent shops But I think a lot of people that are seeking that don't actually need it, and maybe actually doesn't benefit them. Again, going back to undermining maybe our careers, investments is actually quite simple. And it's not until you're really getting into like the multi-million and even billion-dollar club that you need all these really fancy, exciting investments beyond kind of stock, bond, and some liquid alternatives. So to me, it's like if I'm maybe not getting access to some of that stuff, but I have an advisor who's going to pick up the phone when I call. Better yet, I can maybe just walk into their office unannounced because I know they're, again, it's more of a family-oriented conversation. I trust them, they know me. That's what I would prefer from an advisor perspective. And then I think ultimately too, communication. Those independent advisors, those smaller firms, they probably have fewer clients because from a capacity perspective, if you don't have a team of 30 supporting you, there's only so much you can do in a given day and week. And so they're going to get your full attention. And I think that's really important as well. You know, they have your best interests. So those are just some things that I would look for, but I think the communication factor is key. And that's something you can probably feel or parse out and just kind of doing your due diligence on different advisors. Are they quick to respond to you? Are they giving you thorough answers? Are they telling you all the things you should consider beyond just the rosy stuff, right? Because there's a lot of questions too that, you know, maybe these are some things that the client should be considering, and a good advisor is going to put that list in front of you up front instead of making you ask for it down the due diligence track.
Yeah. Can I add a few more things? Is that okay? And some of these things weave into what you already shared, which is I have a very simple framework when I hire people, and I think it is applicable to this situation, which is, do I like you? Do I trust you? And do I think you can get the job done at a very high level? And that's why I'm doing this podcast with you, Paisley. You checked all those boxes. But those are the three things that I would look for in a financial advisor is, do I like you? Do I trust you? And trust is honestly, of the three. If you can have the other two, and if you don't trust the financial advisor, I would never do business with them. They can be likable, they can be very competent, but if you can't trust them, that's a non-starter. So that's like one framework. I would always ask a financial advisor for contact information for 3 clients.
So important.
And I would call 2 or 3 clients up and just ask what their experience is like. It's shocking how many people don't do that.
So important. That's actually such a great point.
100% do that. There's a really cool thing. Just Google broker check. You can do a check on the kind of the background of that financial advisor and find out whether there's anything has happened in their past, as far as maybe somebody was upset and they sued the financial advisor or something along those lines. And with that said, there's plenty of really good financial advisors that have something on their record. But it's important to at least know that it's there. And I would ask them and just say, hey, I did a broker check. I noticed these 2 things on your record. I just want to explore and understand what happened and help me
really
understand
great
this.
Point.
I would say investment philosophy. And I'm a little offended that you said that investing is so simple. No, I'm just kidding. But I think it's important to have a philosophy and have an investment philosophy and understand. And the reason why I think this is important, I'm a very firm believer that everybody should know what they're invested in and why they're invested in that. And advisors should be helping their clients understand their investment philosophy, understanding what they're invested in and why they're invested in it. I would say, another one outside of those things would really be education. I think that people should not be sold things. I think really good financial advisors don't sell clients. I think really good financial advisors educate people, and and then together they make the right decision. Because the reality is, and I've talked to a lot of what I would call end clients, a lot of clients of financial advisors, and you can share something with somebody, an investment idea, a portfolio change, but you may not know everything else going on in that person's life. And so if you educate them on why this could make sense, then they can then evaluate it and kind of plug it in with everything else that they know that you don't know. And then that just helps you both make a more informed decision together. So I think that's a big factor too.
I love all of that. Like as you were saying that I wasn't actually writing it down, but in my head I was like, those are all such valid, important points. So hopefully everybody that started listening to this is still listening to this, and that's why we keep these short, because we try to make them punchy and valuable. So all great points, Josh, but that's all I got.
Yeah. Same here. Hey, Paisley, thank you so much. That's a wrap on Quick Takes number 4. Thanks for joining
See
me.
you guys.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and do not reflect the views, opinions, or policies of any current or former employer, affiliated firm, or client. The content is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. Nothing discussed constitutes a recommendation to buy or sell any securities or investment products. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. The hosts are speaking solely in their personal capacities, and the podcast is not affiliated with, sponsored by, or endorsed by any firm or organization with which they may be associated.